Shut up and sit down.
Yes, sir, we promised you a great man here tonight.
Now I want a nice, clean game. From all of you.
That's great.
Some call us the R word.
Yeah, even has moments of integrity.
But this has been awesome, and we should do this again.
You're funny.
Are you not entertained?
The ATF murdering people.
Is this not why you are here?
With the plan to exterminate the Jews of Europe.
A radical libertarian.
Things on homosexuality and stuff, or just the petty little things that
I'm gonna hop in here real quick.
Like, fucking yes, obviously I did that. And I...
Welcome to Fite.
This is FSM.
Alright, y'all, we had some tech difficulties, but we're back. We've got Jacob Winograd. We've got Ben Heckman. They both covered their intro points before we got yeeted off the ether, but so I'm gonna summarize for you guys what you guys said to like cut down on the replay time a little bit for those that were already watching. Ben said that basically the LP has been barreling towards nothingness for decades and is a burning dumpster fire that wastes libertarian time and energy when they could be doing better things either as agorists in a nonprofit or as politicians in the GOP. And Jacob tried many times over to clarify that he doesn't think all libertarians should be in the Libertarian Party, but he thinks that there is still a place for the LP, namely to take or to like continue to have control over what the word libertarian even means. Do you guys think I did a decent job of summarizing what you guys said so far?
Yeah.
I think it's good enough for us to go on.
All right. So Jacob, I've got my first question for you is, what do you see the potential of the LP actually being within the next couple of years?
All right. So, I mean, it kind of depends on who our presidential candidate ends up being, and how much noise we make. You know, so on the national stage, my hope is that one of the candidates that we have now, whether that's Josh, you know, my favorites right now are Josh Smith, and I know Michael Rechtenwald just filed. He's a Mises Institute guy, and I think he's great. And I think if Spike Cohen decided to throw his hat in, he'd be great as well. Obviously, I was a Dave Smith guy. He's not running, sadly, but I still think that you know, any one of those three guys running who are my favorites, if they were to get the nomination, could do a really good job with the support of the Mises Caucus, the LP, Dave Smith hopefully still going out there and whipping for them and stuff, of generating a lot of noise, you know, being able to talk issues. I think, you know, especially focusing on the economic problems that our country is facing right now, which there's not going to be, like, there's either going to be very few or no Republicans who are really talking about that. I mean, the closest might be Vivek, but I don't, or Vivek, I think it's how you pronounce it. But even then, Vivek, I think for every good point he has a bad one. So it's like, and Trump sometimes, you know, will pay lip service to certain things, but I don't think he really understands what he's talking about. You know, none of the Republicans in the race are going to do a good job of spreading a libertarian message. And the Libertarian Party candidate and vice presidential candidate, I think, could do a really good job. And we could see sort of what happened with Ron Paul in 2008 and 2012. We could see a national campaign that generates a lot of attention and wakes a lot of people up. And the benefit to that would be that instead of just growing the Ron Paul movement and his campaign and stuff, that activity would be funneled into the LP, and we would have the potential for major growth in the LP. And if it's a principled candidate, that means that the people we're attracting are going to actually be coming in hearing actual libertarian ideas, and so I have more faith that they'll stick around longer. And I think there's a lot of opportunities on the local level too. I mean, I think the Guard and the role the Libertarian Party can play in advocating for that over the next couple years, going to play an important role in the anti-war movement. And I think that on the local level, working on issue-based coalitions to try to get more like Second Amendment sanctuaries passed, do more drug decriminalization, city councilmen or city councilwoman, and getting libertarians more engaged on the local level and interacting with the people in their communities those are going to be very useful in not only trying to change the political structure to push more decentralization and nullification, but also to kind of push that grassroots movement of growing the liberty movement by interacting with people and being able to share our ideas with them. And I think the Libertarian Party just gives us I think it gives us a better tool for that local level action, because I just think that because we're not hampered by the like toxic culture or baggage of the GOP or the Democratic Party. As much as libertarians in Fite, and party isn't known as like a war party or a statist party or I mean, we see what happened with Ron Paul and the Ron Paul movement in 08 and 012. So I think if you try to do that stuff at the local level at the GOP, I think that gets diluted because there are just too many other voices who are drowning out what you're saying. Whereas when you do that through your local LP, you're able to say what you want to say unedited without worrying about trying to appease people in the Republican Party. So I think, on the national and local level, that's where some of the ways I think the LP can be a very, very useful tool, and some of the successes and things that I think it could accomplish over the next couple of years.
Ben, do you think any of what he just
said
is possible?
So let me respond to some points that you made before we had to restart the stream, and as well as some points. Certainly possible, but I think more possible with the GOP. Like, there's no reason the GOP can't do anything that Jacob just said, and this too many voices thing doesn't make sense to me, because if you're doing it in the LP, you might have a bunch of voices agreeing with you but nobody listening, because it's the LP, and it's just less people are paying attention to the LP than who are paying attention to the Republican
Wait,
Party.
do you think a lot of people are paying attention to their local GOP and Democratic chapters? Because, I mean, when people are paying attention to the Republican and Democratic parties, they probably don't even know who their local representatives for either of those parties are. And those local parties are not, I think, very active. I mean, certainly not in my area. They're not very active in engaging with the community and things like that. Whereas the Libertarian Party, it's all about being engaged. Like, one of the silver linings of having them know we exist and to advocate for us to get on the ballot, and that creates so many opportunities to talk to people about what we stand for. I mean, Ben, you and I spent hours last year going to party. What's that? And then I get to sit there and give them my 30 to 60 second elevator pitch, and I was able to hand out some business cards so people know about our local monthly meetings and stuff. And I think people are more excited about that than they are I mean, they're not really going to be paying attention or looking to attend a local, the only people who are attending local GOP meetings are just your diehard, GOP, activists at the local level. So I don't think that really equates.
Okay, so I think it's great that you can let people know that the Libertarian Party is the thing. I don't think the Libertarian Party is needed to spread the message of libertarianism. Personally, I think the LP should be completely dissolved at this point. But I'd like to go back and address some points that you made earlier on before we had to end the stream and start it again. Because I think that's just the most productive way to go about this. You said that the LP is good for maintaining the word libertarian or the word libertarianism in sort of the general.
Well, it
sort of,
can, to be clear, it can be, or it can be the exact opposite. It can be a detriment to it, as we've seen in the past.
Yeah. Well, yeah, for
and-
sure. But then you also said that the LP was good for coalitioning. You also said after that that the LP is good for like a networking hub for liberty as far as activism goes, because you just have a lot more young people involved with that. You just have more people in general involved with Young Americans for Liberty who are libertarians. And the LP is good for coalitioning if you don't want those issues that you're coalitioning on to achieve any legislative success whatsoever. If you look at the Republican Party right now, you see that people that are leaning more towards the anti-establishment libertarian side of things are often right in line with a lot of the progressive Democrats when it comes to voting on like war spending or criminal justice reform, corporate welfare reform, stuff like that. You do see some alignment there. And whenever there's like a bipartisan bill for cannabis legalization, that's just another example of that.
Ben's breaking up for me, so I can't hear what he's saying right now.
Need to get the hell.
Oh, there you go. You're good.
Dying on the hill that libertarians need to get the hell out of the Libertarian Party because it is a distraction and it is a waste of time and resources if you care about having any kind of legislative or electoral success. It's pretty clear to me that the GOP is capable of doing everything you just said the LP can do. But in an even larger, you're going to be appealing to more people that way. And I don't understand why we can't just do that through the DOP. If that is your method, you're just going to be talking to a lot more people in general. A lot more people are going to be more receptive because they know you're a Republican going into it. They already have at least some kind of vague idea of what a Republican is.
Like a double agent, like I'm a libertarian in Republican clothing, which I just don't think that's a very useful way to try to, advocate the libertarian message. I mean, I guess you can do it. Like, so obviously Ron Paul is an example of that, but Ron Paul was kind of despised by a large portion of the Republican Party and is still despised by a large portion of the Republican Party to this day. And people kind of knew he was Mr. Libertarian. He was kind of, but he was a rhino. And so, listen, as far as listen, I love the Young Americans for Liberty, and I think that they do good work. I don't think that it would be easy to get a lot of the people my age or older to attend local Young Americans for Liberty meetings and stuff. I think people, especially who are just more oriented towards politics, they look for, when they hear the name Liberty Meetings, you can come and figure out what, see what we're doing. People respond to that. I don't know, but I don't think that's going to, just like if the LP dissolved today, I don't think that we would be able to retain, those people by just switching over to YAL. I mean, I view these things, I view those two groups as serving different purposes to that.
Me, then okay, so if you're claiming that people were responding to you in the York County Libertarian Party, then can you tell me anything that proves that? How much has your membership increased since you became the chair, or how?
I heard you both talking, so I can't quite make out what's going on.
I stopped talking so David could talk.
And then David stopped talking. I mean, listen,
David stopped talking.
I get about, to attend in person, but there's definitely been an election cycle drives this more. Like last year, we saw a lot more growth than we've seen through this election cycle so far, but we've had some growth. We've had people, don't attend every meeting, but they're getting more plugged in over time. There's been some dysfunction.
Right, so people are actively being more responsive to the GOP right now. People are actively, the GOP is, while that's going on, while you're achieving, some people are showing up to virtual meetings sometimes. Well, the GOP is they're not experiencing that. They are experiencing a lot more people interested, a lot more people getting involved. And right now, among the GOP, it's not the same GOP as when Ron Paul was running. This is a much different GOP now, especially since Trump came in there, took a lot of the Ron Paul energy. And let me just preface this by saying that every like bad thing you guys might have to say about the GOP, I probably agree with. I hate the GOP like passionately. There's a party full of, that's not me, you know, I'm not a conservative, you know what I mean? But if you're saying that your success that you're seeing is like some people showing up to some meetings while the Republican Party is out here electing libertarians and getting libertarian legislation passed. And right now in Pennsylvania, there are bipartisan cannabis legalization bills. The bipartisan isn't Democrat and Libertarian, it's Democrat and Republican right now. So completely dissolved. I was ready to leave the Libertarian Party after the presidential election of 2020, but it was the idea of the Mises Caucus takeover and then a Dave Smith presidential campaign that really kept me on board. And whether anyone wants to admit it or not, the main thing that was driving the Mises Caucus takeover of the LP was the idea of a Dave Smith presidential campaign. That's just the fact. And the fact that that's not happening anymore shows me that like, oh, this isn't worth it anymore, because a Dave Smith third party campaign, like there's a strong argument to be had there that that's something to get behind. And I was behind it. But now there's no one else like Dave Smith. Michael Rectenwald's great. Love the guy. Support his work and all that. Spike Cohen's great, you know. Josh Smith is my preferred candidate at the moment. If the Libertarians nominate him, I'll vote for him over Trump easily. However, I kind of forgot what my point there was going to be. But I think that lost my train of thought. I got it back. Dave Smith isn't running anymore. Dave Smith is, because of his unique characteristics as a very funny and charismatic person who's really good at messaging. He would be able to run such a unique campaign that would be such a potent middle finger to the establishment that people getting riled up and wanting to join the LP, and like I could see that being a new Ron Paul revolution, but that's not happening anymore. Therefore, whoever the Libertarians nominate, it's just going to be a repeat of 2020, of 2016, of 2012, of 2008. Michael Rectenwald, if he's the nominee, he's going to get maybe 2% of the vote. Same with everybody else that we just talked about. Okay, Dave Smith is the one dude that might have a chance at getting more than 2% of the vote. And even if he did get 2% of the vote, you know for a fact that Dave Smith would get a lot more people on board with our message. But that's not happening anymore. Dave Smith is getting more people on board with our message without the Libertarian Party. Like, he did that nationwide tour of all the state affiliate conventions. How many more people did that bring on board versus all of his podcast appearances? I would love to know that. I would say that his Joe Rogan podcast appearances are getting a lot more people on board with our ideas than anything to do with the Libertarian Party.
Okay, so as far as the Dave Smith not running argument, I mean, Dave is still going to be going on all of these big platforms, and he's going to be promoting whoever. I mean, unless it's someone like Chase Oliver or I think there's some candidates Dave would not be, you know, down to really promote. But I think if it was Spike or Josh or Rectenwald or any combination of those three, I think he's going to be 100%. Going around the country on a tour still, whipping for them. It might not be for him as the presidential nominee, but I mean, maybe that's not as perfect, but I think that that's still going to wake up a lot of people and get a lot of people interested in voting Libertarian and looking into our ideas more. So, I mean, it's not like Dave Smith died and his ability to be Dave Smith and be that amazing advocate for liberty has died. You know, I mean,
I'm not
yes,
saying there is a special.
There's a special utility to. There maybe was a special utility to him doing it as the presidential nominee, but I don't think that the drop off from that to him just being like one of the major whippers for whoever our presidential nominee is, as long as it's a good combination on the ticket. I don't think that is such a step down that it's worth giving up. You know, obviously we'll have to wait and see what happens there. Right now my support is for Josh Smith, but again, I think Rechtenwald or Spike, any combination of those three, I think they could do really well. I think they all have really good messages. You know, Rechtenwald's a former socialist, Josh is a former Marine, Spike is, you know, really good. Spike's got a pretty big following of his own. It's not quite Dave's following, but it's also it's not nothing. So that can't be discounted either. You know, and I think that you said your point about the GOP not being the same now as it was during the Ron Paul days, and that's true. There has been some shift in the GOP, but it's, I mean, look at it this way. It was a lot of work for the Mises Caucus to take over the LP. I don't think if we funneled all libertarians in the GOP that we would have any chance of taking it over. And because of that, I think we would still be consistently sabotaged by the leadership at the top, both nationally and in the state leaderships, and they would,
for sure,
you know, they would make any efforts that much more difficult. And you know, back in Ron Paul's day, the podcast network, the alternative media, just didn't exist. So it made more sense for Ron Paul to get a big platform boost by attaching his name to the GOP ticket, even though he was basically a libertarian rhino. But I don't think we need that GOP boost anymore. And any boost that the GOP gives us, it's like that benefit has to be weighed against the negatives, which is all of the baggage that comes with the GOP when a candidate's running for them. Again, and this is where I think that division of labor is useful. If you feel compelled to go into the Republican Party and advocate for libertarian political ideas and political change from that machine, I'm not going to tell you like that's dumb. Like, I think that there is some good work that can be done there. But the point is, I don't think everyone's going to be good at doing that. Like, I would be terrible at it. Just straight up. I am not good at pretending to be something I'm not, or trying to be coy about it, or trying to play politics in a way where I have to be constantly compromising on my ideals. And I think a lot of libertarians strongly agree with me. And I think the Libertarian Party's main purpose right now is, you know, again, we're not going to have major political wins right now. And the ones we get are not going to be really sexy. They're going to be really small wins at the local level. And right now, just because of the takeover, there's a lot of infrastructure change happening at the national level, happening at the state level as well. And so, again, none of that is sexy. None of that is, you know, we're in a grind right now, and we're getting ready for 2024. And so I get there's a lot of people who have lost steam, and that Dave dropping off has worsened that. And I'm sympathetic to it. But I still think that the Libertarian Party, in its ideal form, can be that voice in the political, directly in the political system. I know Yao engages in politics, you know, but it's indirect. It's not like it's not in the same way that a political party is engaged. The Libertarian Party is still the largest third party in the country. It bears our namesake. And so because I don't think, listen, if I were to have a position that is different than my position, it would be yours that the Libertarian Party should be dissolved, right? But I don't think there's any chance in hell of that happening. If the Mises Caucus, if our style libertarian leave, the Sarwarks and the other types of libertarians that used to be the controlling interest there are just going to come back, and they're going to make it what it was before, and that is going to continue to, the Libertarian Party will continue to be an albatross around the movement and around the term libertarian. And so I'm very committed to making sure the Libertarian Party is libertarian as long as that exists, and I think it's always going to exist. And I think that its role is to be the radical voice within the political establishment that is in the you know, kind of like in the spirit of Ron Paul, just unapologetically proclaiming the truth about any given situation, whether that's the war between Ukraine and Russia and how this is really a proxy war that U.S. Is fighting with Russia and at the expense of Ukrainian and Russian lives, to the funneling of money into the Bidens and the Democratic Party and the military-industrial complex. That is like right now that is our Ron Paul moment. There's no one in the GOP that is, I know again Vivek, I think, is kind of the best voice in the GOP right now. But I wish him all the well in waking people up that he can, but he's still no Ron Paul. And the people he's bringing in, if he's bringing in any, are going to be coming into a GOP where the soul of the GOP is not anti-war. It's just not. There's maybe more anti-war people there than before, but the controlling interest is still it's still the war party, and the Democrats are the war. It's a uniparty, right? They're all invested in war. So we need to be boldly proclaiming the truth there. We need to be boldly proclaiming the truth about what's going on with the economy and the Federal Reserve and the way that what happened with COVID and what Trump and Biden both did has made this worse. Like, that's our role, is that we don't have to worry about, oh, we said the truth and now, oh man, we lost some Republican donors because they don't like that, or the Mitch McConnell isn't going to support us because he doesn't like that, or we're going to get sabotaged by half or 2/3 of the party because they don't like what we said. We are the truth tellers, and being the truth tellers in the political system is a very useful tool for waking people up. And no matter what strategy we employ, right, whether it's agorism, whether it's trying to grow the Libertarian Party, whether it's trying to, I don't know, take over the GOP or at least maximize the good you can do in the GOP, whatever you want to do, I think what we can all agree on is that we need more libertarians to make this stuff happen. And so we can do that through multiple ways, but I think the LP is going to be a player in that realm, and so maximizing the good it does is something that I think is important.
I think that's a good distinction to make, that if it's always going to be a thing versus if it could get blown up. I personally disagree with both of you. I think that that's a selfish opinion, that if you don't get your way, you have to blow up the
Well, it's not my opinion, but it's like if I were to have an opinion other than mine, I would be like, listen, I think if the Libertarian Party is going to be embarrassing the term libertarian and not, it's like if you're not winning politically and you're doing a terrible job advocating the libertarian message, then if those are my only two if I can't have any other way with the party, then I would kind of prefer it doesn't exist. But I don't think that's a reality. I just don't think that that's something that's going to happen.
Here's why. Listen, if Dave can go on podcast and say that, the Soviet Union dissolved, so and slavery was abolished, therefore, we should still hold out hope that some radical decentralization and reduction of the size of government is possible, then just by that same metric, the dissolution of the Libertarian Party is just as possible, if not more possible. And I think libertarians are some of the most smart people within politics, which is why I want this message to get out. This is why I wanted to participate in this debate. Right now, the cost of living is skyrocketing. We are on the brink of nuclear war with Russia and possibly China too. Shit is hitting the fan at such an enormous scale for this country right now that we just don't have time to wait around for the Libertarian Party to start achieving anything. There's nothing the Libertarian Party can do right now that is going to get us off the suicide mission that we're currently on. If there was more time, if things weren't as bad, if this was still 2018 when I joined the party, I'd be right on board with you. But shit just keeps getting worse and worse and worse, and libertarians are putting more and more effort and energy into a party that can't do anything, that is only good for disappointments and underachieving. I think that if we're gonna, I agree with you that we need libertarians to be loud and sharing their critiques with everybody, and I think those critiques would hold significantly more weight coming from within the GOP. If we're talking electorally and legislatively. And by the way, I'm open to being convinced that agorism is a much more it's a much better route than the GOP. That's very likely. I'm not 100% sure on that right now. However, I do think that those critiques that libertarians can make about the GOP, about Donald Trump, about Vivek Ramaswamy are going to hold a lot more weight coming from within the GOP, and people are going to take that a lot less hostile, or take that with a lot less hostility than they would if we were coming at it from another party. I think we're more natural allies with conservative Republicans than anybody else in the political world right now, and
But
that
I
pains
think
me to say.
I think we can be allies with them, but doesn't mean we need to be in the same political party as them. And there's also a large.
But you're in the
swath of
same
people-
political party as like communists right now. Like, say what you will about the Mises
Okay,
Caucus
okay,
takeover,
listen.
but there are
The
some
amount,
libertarian socialists in the party right now.
Ben, the amount of communists in the Libertarian Party, the percentage of that, compared to the percentage of bloodthirsty warmongers in the GOP, like, come on, that's not even comparable, man.
Yeah.
Like, you know that.
No.
Like,
Yeah, I
it's
know
not,
that, sure,
it's
but
not
still, like,
comparable. Like, we're talking about like 6 people on Twitter who identify as like Georgists or ANCOMs or libertarian socialists, and they're annoying and they have like 12 Twitter followers. Like, that's not a major contingent in the LP.
Listen, in 2012, 2013, the Iowa state GOP was made up of almost entirely Ron Paul supporters. The establishment wing of the Iowa Republican Party at the time was furious, but Ron Paul Republicans managed to take over like that entire state. And if they could do it, we could do it all.
What happened? Why don't they still have control of it?
I'm honestly not sure if they do or not. I'm not sure what.
I'd be interested to know.
I would just like to point out, for point of order here, that they might have been made up entirely of Ron Paul supporters, but when they showed up to the delegation, to the actual RNC convention, their state chair, like their delegation chair, still said Mitt Romney, not Ron Paul. Even though Ron Paul won they took over the state party. You're right. He won the caucus, the Iowa State Caucus in 2012. And then he still didn't get any of their delegation votes because Republican Party.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure the chair of the Iowa Republican Party was voted in 2013, and he was in 2013, so after the 2012 election, and he was the Ron Paul supporter that like led that charge, and he became the chair of that state party. So that was sort of after that happened. So
I mean, listen, I'm not saying there are no libertarians in the Republican Party, and I'm not saying they're not doing any good. I mean, I know that a former YAL, I think, member and organizer is currently part of the leadership for the Republican Party in Colorado, and he's the one who reached out to the LP of Colorado to try to, negotiate that sort of like deal they have to try to like, if the GOP there runs candidates that meet the sort of like pledge that the LP of Colorado drafted, that the LP there agrees not to run anyone against them. But I think an example of like that shows how, like, again, we don't all need to be doing the same thing, and I'm not saying we even need to be enemies with libertarians in the Republican Party. I think a lot of people just view this as like a zero-sum game. That's like, there's one strategy that everyone has to be doing, but again, not everyone's going to be good at doing those things. Again,
I'm not advocating for one strategy, by the way.
Okay, well, and I know you've also paid lip service to agorism and being involved in other groups, so I mean, fair enough. I'm not trying to say you're saying that, but again, I think that the LP, listen, it's not a perfect tool right now. I think it's going to take a long time to really reshape that party.
Yeah, and we don't have that time.
Okay, so this gets into your other. Listen, I mean, predicting the future is tough, and I think that if we're going
it's really
to let
easy to predict that the cost of living is going to keep going up, dude. I'm not making crazy predictions here. Like, shit is hitting the fan, and if you think otherwise,
well, let me finish my point here. Operating out of a high time preference is generally not a good way to make calculated decisions as to what the best solution is going to be, long term or short term. And sometimes something might work good in the short term and be disastrous in the long term. So I'm not very persuaded by panic and alarm arguments. Uh, Again, I'm not saying things are great, and I'm not saying things aren't going to keep getting worse. I'm kind of the opinion that things are going to get worse, and that's where libertarians are going to have to, as things get worse, continue to get louder. I mean, look at what has happened in Argentina. Like, I think that as things continue to get worse over the next 5 years, if the Libertarian Party keeps growing and playing its cards right, I mean, again, I'm not going to predict this will happen, but to say it's not a possibility that the Libertarian Party couldn't start to see massive growth as the country continues to plummet and people just keep seeing the Republicans and Democrats act as a uniparty that are just contributing to that fall. And then if we're running principled candidates like that they have, like the guy down in Argentina, that could that could be something that happens, and we could see a real libertarian moment in our country. But things might have to continue to kind of get worse. And by the way, listen, I don't think, at the local level, I think that the LP and the GOP can do things to mitigate some of this and to kind of bulwark from some of this federal and global tyranny. But in terms of making major pushes against our fiscal policy or our war policy or things like that, not only, yes, the Libertarian Party is obviously, we're nowhere close to being able to stop any of that. The GOP, I think, is also equally not going to stop that. So, I mean, the GOP has been completely feckless or complicit in these the advancing of all of this government tyranny over the last 20, 30, 40 years. And so the argument that we need to abandon the LP and go to the GOP and that's going to be the solution, I find that to be highly skeptical as well.
Yeah, I just want to point out that the last time that shit really hit the fan super hard, the GOP held the majority of the reins.
100%.
And to the, as much as we all love Ron Paul running in the Republican Party and giving lip service to that libertarian Republican idea is how we got Trump. Is this idea that there can be this anti-establishment hero populist that runs in the GOP and takes down the deep state. Like, Trump got a bunch of Ron Paul's voters. That's just an objective fact. And that turned out terribly. And I feel like there's an argument to, that is what that strategy ends with every time, is that you bring a bunch of people into, as Jacob called it, the war potty, and
the war potty.
and then someone else is going to come along behind you with more money and more establishment backing, using your rhetoric and to win the race that you lost, because the establishment is never going to actually let you win that race.
And let me just add one little thing to that. The best candidate in the GOP right now is Vivek, and he makes a lot of arguments that are, either tangential or exactly the libertarian argument, but then he equally, with the same charisma and confidence, makes a lot of unlibertarian points. And so it's even though I like when he says good things, it's he's not really growing the liberty movement. He's just, at best, he's introducing some more libertarian ideas into the GOP culture, which, hey, I'll support that, but I would rather be putting my energy. I think libertarians should be focusing on putting their energy in lifting up the voices who are just putting out the actual libertarian message consistently. And again, if there are people in the Republican Party who do that, you have your Thomas Masseys, you have Rand Paul most of the time, Justin Amash before he left.
Gates, Lauren Boebert, Marjorie Taylor Greene. They're not all libertarians, but they're very libertarian leaning in a lot of ways. You got Matt Gaetz out here calling out MK Ultra by name. I don't know, man. That's pretty significant to me. But let's not just talk about the federal level here. Let's talk about the state and local level. What you see at the state level is Republicans electing libertarians a lot. And every time that libertarian Republican is elected, who changes their party affiliation to libertarian, they run for re-election. They never win. That doesn't happen. You see at the state level, the GOP doing so much more for liberty than the Libertarian Party ever could have done.
Sure. No, listen. I will agree with that. Although, I mean, I think it varies a lot by state, right? So, I actually, again, I mean, I was kind of with Dave Smith when he was endorsing Blake Masters, which was a very controversial move. But you know, I think it could have been handled better. The timing was awful. I think it should have been done way earlier than that. So that's not exactly the blueprint there. I think what LP Colorado is trying to do a much better strategy. And that's where I think, listen, I mean, I know a lot of the more, I don't know, classical liberal or just non-Mises Caucus libertarians hate the kingmaker strategy, as they call it. But I think that's like an effective use of the little bit of influence and power the you guys have is ballot access. And if you weren't facing all that, I think the reason why the ballot access laws have been leveraged so hard against the New York Libertarian Party is because like they're trying to stop you from, you know, exploiting what I'm talking about here, which is that you guys could potentially be a better oppositional party to the Democratic majority there than the Republican Party could.
In New York,
so again,
we
this
don't
is where
actually have to make this decision though, because we're one of the 8 states with fusion voting. So I can run as a Libertarian and a Republican if I wanted to.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. So again, I'm not saying, and I think most of the people of my persuasion would say that like we're not saying we should be like super partisan in supporting the LP or an LP strategy. I'm kind of more partisan at the local level, and then that kind of diminishes the further up you go. But there's even been Republicans here in my own county who I've had conversations with, and I've, you know, supported and said, hey, you know, I'll do my best to make sure that we don't run anyone against you. That's fine. There's room for that kind of cooperation and political engineering. You know, I think, listen, another point you made was that you think agorism is a very useful tool. I think this is also where the Libertarian Party can be useful, which I know people are going to probably like who know what agorism is. And if Jose Galison ever listens to this, I know the veins are popping out of his forehead because he hates when I make this argument. But listen, I don't think that agorism and the LP strategy have to be opposed. Listen, like Ben, you've been in our Mises Caucus, like signal chats and discords and stuff. Like agorism is something that's talked about a lot. Like that's a major element of the decentralized revolution idea is, you know, not only passing laws of nullification, but like creating the demand for that by encouraging a more agorist strategy at the local level. And that's something I think that just works better with, you know, operating in that LP space than like trying to operate and listen, you could do it in the Republican space too, but again that's where I say everyone's going to have this is going to vary by geography, vary by state. Listen, like New Hampshire is different than Pennsylvania, which is different than Florida, which is different than New York, which is different than Georgia, which is different than California. Like, so everyone's going to have to kind of take the lay of the land at their local level and then kind of figure out what their skill sets are, what, you know, and figure out where they think they can be the most useful in advocating libertarian ideas at that local level. But the party itself, I think, because it's always going to exist, the LP is libertarian, and that they are the truth tellers that are going to be holding people accountable and more indirect measures.
All right, I want to cut in here.
Yeah, no, again, I would just
promised that we would read comments from the chat a little bit, and we have had quite a few, so I do want to jump and just rapid fire through just a few of these. I'm going to start at recent, or yeah, I'm going to start at the top. Our normal people attending LP meetings from David Brady's in here a lot. I think we established that it depends on where you are, whether people are fired up about the GOP or the LP. I had to leave the LP just to join RFK Jr.'s campaign. I think that's as silly as joining Vivek's campaign. Jacob, who is passing Defend the Guard legislation? Is it the LP reps? I'll let you that one was directly to you.
Yeah, I mean it's a loaded question. Obviously, there's not really LP reps at the state level right now. Although you can.
Wait, what happened to Marshall Burt?
I mean,
Did he
there
get
might be.
reelected?
I mean, there might be some, but I'm not an expert as to all the elected libertarians across the country in every state. Like I know in New Hampshire, where like that decision was recently being talked about. I mean, that's primarily Republicans who are pushing it. Yeah, I mean, at the state level, sometimes it's more, Republicans are going to serve a role, and I don't think that's in conflict with my argument. I mean, the point is not that everyone should be in the LP, and the point isn't that the Republican Party raising awareness of Defend the Guard. And I mean, there's no way to measure the impact of things like Rage Against the War Machine and the messaging that the Libertarian Party has been putting out, and to what extent that is part of the collective demand that is making legislation like Defend the Guard more popular and putting more pressure on the legislatures in all of these states to consider, bringing those bills up to be voted on.
Fair, very fair.
But yeah, I mean, the LP strategy I support is mostly local level nullification, and Defend the Guard is something we support, but we don't have your county doesn't have control over the National Guard.
If local level politics are easier, via the LP, I would agree with that, but they would even be more easier while doing that because they already have power than it is through the LP.
Well, I mean, if we're talking hyper local, the majority of the country is nonpartisan at a municipal
Exactly.
level.
I was about to make that point. But the useful thing, so this is something that David Brady and others have talked about, like, well, if the local races are nonpartisan, why run LP anyway? Because when you attach your run to the Libertarian Party, you're necessarily forcing the conversation into like the libertarian realm, and people who are attracted to your ideas, it is an opportunity to, as we draw people towards us, to funnel them into something that is purely libertarian, rather than it's like funneling new libertarians into the GOP. I don't think that's where new libertarians should go. It's almost like if you funnel new libertarians into the GOP, they're going to be bombarded by a bunch of non-libertarians. Where if you funnel new libertarians into the LP, especially if like local candidates are doing that, that grows the movement and the party at the same time and increases your ability to have that local level coalition. That again, I think it's not impossible to get elected at the local level. Pennsylvania had a lot of local elected libertarians. I mean, as David likes to point out to people, I am a cop, elected constable
Fucking
in my
bastard.
county. Yeah, we have people who are township supervisors. We have people who are on city council. We've had elected mayors. So and when they do that, they're not doing it under the GOP banner. And then like if you just do it under the GOP banner, like it's like, oh, a Republican won mayor. A libertarian does it, suddenly that's a conversation starter.
Yeah.
We already have real libertarian institutions that can serve the purpose of funneling people into a pure libertarian message. We don't need the Libertarian Party for that. We have the Mises Institute. We have You Are the Power. We have Young Americans for Liberty, which is arguably real libertarianism.
Not really.
We don't need the Libertarian Party to be that source of pure libertarianism.
We do if they want to be involved in politics at all.
Right.
If that's
yeah,
what
I mean
got
those
them
things
involved,
are not.
If they came in because they were, if they heard a candidate and said, "Ooh, that sounds interesting," because they gave a shit about politics, you're not going to send them off to You Are the Power or a think tank like the Mises Institute. They care about politics. They want to volunteered on a local campaign. They probably want to like knock doors, send out flyers, go to events.
Not to mention more people will discover You Are the Power and Young Americans for Liberty and the Mises Institute if they are interested in finding out what the word libertarian is when they see a libertarian candidate running and having any level of success at that local level, versus if it's just a regular person running GOP. I don't think that I don't think that creates as much of an opportunity to have those conversations. And again, I
don't know about that one, Jacob. I don't know about that one. As someone who has worked within Young Americans for Liberty and has helped a lot of Ron Paul Republicans get elected, and as someone who has also witnessed the Ron Paul revolution after the fact, it seems to me like Libertarian Republicans are introducing more people to the Mises Institute and Young Americans for Liberty and things like that. Maybe You Are the Power is a unique kind of thing because Spike has really seen his come up within the Libertarian Party, and you know that's a pretty strong argument against me, is like Spike Cohen's existence in general. But yeah, again, like I just don't. I think what you're seeing right now is the Republican Party is doing a hell of a lot better job at electing libertarians, passing libertarian legislation, and black markets. Within, like, if we're talking agorism, the cannabis black market is doing so much more for cannabis legalization than the Libertarian Party is, and you could say that for any other black market as well.
I would argue that a good chunk of the people behind, I don't know, cannabis, some of the other harder drugs, not so much, but some of the people behind, like, the psilocybin black market are big L libertarians. And have
not to mention, like,
how are they using the Libertarian Party? They might be registered libertarians, but how are the psilocybin, DMT, LSD people using the Libertarian Party to achieve their goals? Do they just happen to be libertarians, or are they actively using the Libertarian Party to achieve their goals?
Fair enough. I'm just going to run through a couple more of these comments. David Brady also said, I don't know a single GOP voter who hates Ron Paul. That's probably because you live in an echo chamber online, homeboy. I know plenty.
I know a ton.
Yeah, like so
there are
many.
A ton.
Yeah, like that's just, yeah, go out and talk to some GOP voters that aren't Ron Paul supporters, and you'll learn some shit.
Can I say something to that?
Sure.
I don't think that I think I'm not with Tho Bishop here. Like, I think that libertarians are despised by a lot of Republicans, and I think if we do go into the GOP, we need to be like loud and somewhat like we need to be assertive about this. We can't be like playing nice. So that's what I would say to that.
Fair enough. Chase Oliver is the candidate the LP deserves. I would disagree. I'd say it's Lars Mapstead at least. It's exactly the candidate that we have all sat around begging for. It's like, oh, I just wish we had a millionaire that wanted to just like run for the fun of it. So like, come on, that's at least give us some credit.
He's well funded. I'll give him credit for that. I just don't think Lars is going to wake a lot of people up to become libertarians. Just my opinion.
Agreed.
I mean, I think he'll. Yeah, I mean that's a whole other conversation. We'll save that for another day.
Yeah.
I have to have another presidential debate.
I'll come back to do a Libertarian Party candidate fight club.
Oh, that would be fun if we just had like a surrogate from each candidate instead of any of the candidates to do a presidential debate. That would be, get like Ryan Graham instead of Chase, have like you instead of Josh, have like Larry Sharp instead of Lars, and that would be fun. National politics matters, and in an age of a dying empire, you need the people with the solutions to be relevant. The LP doesn't provide that.
True.
A lot of libertarians don't agree with a lot of
solutions.
The GOP platform.
We have two problems. We have the GOP is relevant and doesn't offer the solutions 98% time. The LP is offering the solutions. I agree they're not relevant on the federal level, and more and more influential and known. Yeah, I mean that's my short answer to that.
So David also says your dog catcher roles aren't stopping people from dying as the empire collapses. He didn't say dog catcher. I agree.
We're not targeting dog catcher.
He said constable,
the
which,
Mises
if
Caucus,
anything...
mayor, sheriff, city council, township supervisor, constable. These are positions where I agree. We're not wasting resources running people for dog catcher. or positions like that.
Yeah, if anything, like positions like sheriff and constable have the greatest, like when shit hits the fan, it's like the FEMA people, or like your county emergency response team, your law enforcement, and your local elected officials. Those are the people who are going to be in positions of authority when shit hits the fan. More than anyone, more than your congressman, more than your president. So I think regardless of which party you're talking about, the exact thing that Jacob is the thing that's going to help if you're in those positions.
And again, and this varies state by state, but like my impression is that these local positions are not ones that the local GOP and local Democratic parties, they don't put that much time and energy into. They don't care about that. They're focused way more at the federal and the state level. And they might start to change that as we start to get more local victories. But in the meantime, if they're going to give those opportunities to us, I think we should be taking them.
Yeah. So I do want to make you defend us. Ben hasn't specifically brought it up yet, but I'm gonna do it anyway. Do you still think that the Libertarian Party can do all of the things that you said in your opening statements after the destruction of the infrastructure, fundraising, and membership that's happened over the last year and a half?
Well, it certainly doesn't help.
I was gonna bring that up. Yeah.
It certainly doesn't help. I'm not going to beat around the bush about that. The LNC's performance this past year, in terms of, I think there's been some good things that they've done in terms of activism and stuff, but internally, they're hemorrhaging money and membership, some of which was expected and a lot of which wasn't, because it was just a mismanagement of data and resources. I'm hoping that gets turned around. Time will tell, but I mean, yeah, obviously
how does
doesn't
that
help.
get turned around when you still have like just this week 2 more states left Civi CRM and started taking their things just statewide, 2 big states.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not directly in the machinations of what's going on with all that, so everything I know is more secondhand. I'm more focused on my state party and my local party than I am national. So I mean, I'm not the person to answer the questions as to how it gets fixed. I think a lot of what needs to happen is the membership that were lost, phone banking to get those people back, which I know is already underway, and finding the correct technologies to be using at the national and the state level is something that I think a lot of people are trying to figure out right now. That's not my area of expertise. All I can do is hope that the people who do know that stuff more than me will get that stuff figured out quickly and get the party across the country, in a better position from a data management and financial position.
Fair enough. Ben, your thoughts?
I'm of the opinion that the sort of mismanagement of funds that occurred is, I don't know. I think that could be, maybe I'm schizophrenic, but I smell some COINTELPRO fuckery going on there. I don't know what.
I mean, you're
it
definitely
seems too...
schizophrenic. There's no doubt there.
Yeah, man, I shouldn't have smoked that DMT, but I don't know. I think that that's just like that really sucked to see. Like, even I thought the Libertarian Party was more competent than that, but now I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely I was more inclined to agree with everything you've said so far tonight, Jacob, 2 years ago, when the pragmatic caucus still existed and JBH and Ken Mollman were at the helm. Not that Ken Mollman actually
to add
was
to that, David,
treated as vice chair at all, but that's a whole other fucking conversation.
If I could share my biggest critique of the Mises caucus real quick, it's that the old guard, for all of their issues, at least the prags and JBH and Sarwark, these people were like sophisticated. They knew what they were doing with all this stuff. You know, they didn't strike me as like stoners who wear flat hats, like the majority of the Mises Caucus leadership seems to be. You know,
Flat hats are cool,
fired.
bro.
Shots fired.
Fucking flat hats are cool, bro. Just kidding. There's a reason that this is still in perfect, pristine condition with the sticker on it. I don't wear flat hats.
Listen, the weakest part of the takeover has been the management of resources and infrastructural change. You know, by far. I mean, I don't think there's any argument about that. As far as I can tell, it's a combination of inexperience, incompetence, and I think there were a few bad actors in the bunch who I think have been removed. You know, some of it I think was.
Wait, they got rid of Heights?
Don't go there, bro. Come on.
Sorry, I had
don't come on. Heiss is my brother. I mean, you might disagree with him, but he's anyway.
Hey guys, keep answering questions. I gotta go take a leak. I'll be right back.
Okay.
All right. But I also think, I mean, from what I've been told, it was a perfect storm of the current LNC screwed things up, but it was also kind of a weird screwed up system that they inherited anyway. So that doesn't you know, shift the blame. It just means that listen, I mean, you say you think the Prags did a better job of running the party beforehand. It's like I think that in some ways they made the numbers look better, but I don't think that means that the infrastructure and everything was in perfect shape.
That I meant that when I say the Prags, I mean the actual pragmatic caucus, not the people that the Mises Caucus labels as Prags. I do not mean the radical caucus plant Nick Sarwark. I do not mean Gary Johnson. I do not mean Bill Weld. I mean the actual pragmatic caucus, who had 2 years in office, and that is it. And they spent the majority of it running a re-election campaign because there was a campaign against them from 6 weeks in. That's who I mean. I don't even mean the people that made the numbers look good with Gary Johnson. I mean the people that made the numbers look like trash with Joe Jorgensen. But I mean the people who were building an infrastructure, running trainings across the country, building up the CRM and continuing to like have Ken do that. I mean the people that were actually in office for those 2 years.
And this is where like this stuff is not my area of expertise. I've heard a lot of people try to explain why they have issues with Civi and the CRM, and why they want to move away from it. So that stuff is, I let other people handle that fight. I'm much more focused on the messaging and campaigning element. But those are important elements, and you can't run a political party without your data management and your finances in order. And yeah, they'd be turned around sooner rather than later. And if they don't, then that's definitely going to hurt the, you know, accomplishing the goals that I said at the onset that I think the party can accomplish, but it does need to get its shit in order.
Yeah. We're going to take activism through entrepreneurship. Crafton Business Services is the way to go. Go on over to crafton.us/start. If you're trying to start a business and you want a bunch of anarchists running beside you, telling you how to avoid government taxes, fees, and loopholes, or go through the loopholes and avoid the taxes and fees, crafton.us/start.
Yeah, if there's a couple more questions in the comments, or questions that Ben or you have, David, I can do that. I'm going to say at like 9:20, I'm going to have to sign off if we're not closing it up.
Fair enough. Yeah, apologize again for the ridiculousness of how we started off. Dave was right on everything in his debate with Sarwark, except on the debate resolution. Political parties exist in the political system to win elections.
Again, I view, I mean, the analogy I've made is that if algorithm is counter-economics, I think the Libertarian Party should be engaged in counter-politics. I don't think that we should just be playing the same game that the Republican Party or Democratic Party play. I mean, I think we should be playing, we should be in the political process to flip the tables. I mean, listen, I'm a Christian, so I'm going to follow after the example of Jesus in the temple. And I think we should be fashioning whips and flipping tables, man. Like, I think that is the role of the LP. Now, obviously, that I think the means by which we should be doing that is by engaging, if you're in the LP, is to, yes, to some extent engage in the political system. But I don't like the phrasing the Libertarian Party exists to win elections. Like, that, listen, if the only goal was to win elections, then yes, just go join the GOP of the Democratic Party. You're going to win elections a lot easier. But just winning elections hasn't done a very good job at making this country better or at preserving liberty. One of my critiques of the old Libertarian Party strategy was that, yes, they were able to achieve some measure of growth, but I don't think that it was, or like they get high vote turnouts, but I don't think it actually attributed to like moving the needle in any significant way or growing the liberty movement in a significant way. I don't mean that it grew at zero. Like, I'm sure that there are some libertarians who exist because of Gary Johnson or George Jorgensen, or et cetera. But I'd be skeptical if they've become diehard libertarians, or if they had more of like an infatuation. I mean, the analogy I would use, again, I'm going to make biblical analogies because that's who I am. Get over it if you don't like it. But the parable that Jesus uses about planting seeds, he says some seeds get planted in shallow soil and the roots don't go very deep, and then they get blown away, they get choked out by weeds, or blown away by the storms of the world. And I think the type of people who become libertarians through some of the old LP strategies and stuff, they became libertarians in a very shallow way, but they did not become libertarians in the same sense that, like, I'm a libertarian or Ben's a libertarian or David is a libertarian. They became more of the just like fiscal conservative, socially liberal. That means I'm a libertarian. But they weren't. But the roots of their libertarian ideology didn't go very deep.
I mean,
so
I only exist because of Gary Johnson. So
again, I'm not saying zero,
yeah.
but I'm skeptical that there's, again, it's like, I don't think that the majority of the people that Gary Johnson brought into the party are like you, David. In terms of like they are diehard to the core libertarians. Like, you and I can disagree over strategy all day long sometimes, but I know that you're a diehard libertarian and that you're, well versed in libertarian ideology and literature, economics, and things like that. Whereas I think there's a lot of libertarians out there who I've engaged with, of the Gary Johnson type, who I think that their understanding of libertarianism is just very shallow, and that's a problem.
Yeah. I want to take one more question, but I'll take it because I can. Ronwell asked, how do we do the great messaging now that Dave Smith isn't running for president? And you kind of already answered this, Jacob, and it's an argument that I was making for months and months as to why Dave shouldn't even be the nominee to begin with. And that is that he can still do all of that great messaging, even if he's not the presidential nominee.
Yeah, he didn't die.
Yeah.
He didn't fall off the face of the planet. He's still doing all the same stuff as before. He's just not doing it with the added, oh, I'm doing this and running for president.
Yeah.
Which Dave was never going to be someone who was going to. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. That's like I meant to say this way earlier, but like that. What you just said is like the crux of my argument. I'm not trying to say that, like, since Dave isn't running for president anymore, that his ability to do what he's doing as far as messaging has diminished at all. In fact, I mean, I want Dave to keep doing that because he is doing such a good job at that. So that's all I wanted to say about that.
Yeah, but if he's doing that, he can either be pointing people to a party and a caucus and a candidate and a movement that's doing amazing things, or he can be like, yeah, I have this ideology that is kind of sort of co-opted every once in a while by two major parties, and like, here, look at this candidate every decade.
I think
he can point to an 80-year-old geriatric that did something 20 years ago, but that's about it. Oh, you're cutting out on me. I'm gonna get a lot of hate for that comment about Ron Paul, but that's okay.
No, I think your point about Ron Paul is fair to the extent that like what he did in the GOP was 20 years ago, and I think it was a once in a lifetime, once in a generation kind of thing. He was a once in a generation kind of candidate, and I'm grateful for what he did, but I think what Ron Paul accomplished has more to do with Ron Paul than it does the GOP. So, and yes, you're back. Anyway, I don't know if we.
All right.
How do we want to close this out? We want to give closing statements or just
Yeah. Give me a closing statement along with a oh shit, did I lose both of you again? Gotta be fucking kidding me. Well, guys, if my program decides that it wants to stop catching itself on fire, maybe we'll get them back, maybe we won't. Check out the channel next week. Wednesday night we have Judd Weiss in the house, John McAfee's former running mate in 2016, and I don't know, Ben, where did you go? I don't I can't see you guys. The feds did get you. So yeah, come on back next Wednesday, or like this coming Wednesday for that. Dave Smith is coming on the week after that, and then Austin Peterson the week after that. And I will try to get these guys back on for some closing statements if I can, but it doesn't look like it wants to do anything at all. I don't even know if I can end the stream, so this should be interesting.